I love the fact that SaaS software allows you to just build something that people use, improves their lives, and they pay you a little bit of the value that they derive from the software. One of my biggest blind spots was in realizing what more fundamental changes I can make to the product that would satisfy the goal of making it a lot bigger. We really should have made Dropbox Pro multi-seat earlier. It's so much easier to get someone to just add one more seat and now make $200 a year. When you have these gut feels, like in the Matrix when you saw a black cat, twice, and it's like, that's weird. When you see these things and you think, oh, it's just my craziness. Think to yourself, is it your craziness or is it something that is actually valid? Young people see AI as an operating system, like you do everything through it. And I think that's really becoming the default. The technological revolutions, inspire these markets that grow quickly and then a little bit kind of normalize.
If you had told me that, there's Otter and then there's 15 other meeting recording or meeting transcription tools, many of them growing quickly, I would have been skeptical that there's so much room for, effectively the same type of technology. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to Revenue Blind Spots powered by Otter AI. I hope you are aware of Revenue Blind Spots at this point. This is where we talk to leaders in the go-to-market space and talk about the pivotal moments in their careers. Our focus is to dive deep into the blind spots that have shaped their leadership strategy and growth, uncovering lessons that can help the next generation of revenue executives. Today on the show, we've got the Chief Growth Officer of Otter AI, Darius Contractor. Previously, he ran growth at Facebook Messenger. We've all heard of that company, of course. He started the growth team at Airtable and was CPTO at Bebo.com and Vendor. He's an investor with 20 Growth, and he received his CS degree from Stanford. He is a student of the Valley, an executive and veteran of the Valley, and we're excited to have you on the show, Darius. Welcome to Revenue Blind Spots.
Thanks for having me.
I gave your bio a little bit, but it's always useful a little bit to just hear from your perspective and in your words a little bit about your background. So walk us through the key themes of the last 10 to 15 years of your work in software.
I've always been a programmer who was really excited about product. I really wanted to kind of go deep into the details, but also build something that people really use and love and hopefully spreads. Early in my career, I got into growth at this company Tickle, where we were sharing dog tests with one another. And I ended up going more towards social networking for a bit. And then I realized my heart was really more in SaaS. I love the fact that SaaS software allows you to just build something that people use, improves their lives, and they pay you a little bit of the value that they derive from the software. I just thought that was a really clean business model. And there's just so many different SaaS apps that people need to make their lives better. I mean, think about how many we use in our personal life and then also our work life. And that's what's brought me into companies like Dropbox and Airtable and Otter. It's just little bits of software that make your life better.
I love it. And as a loyal and devout user of Otter, I appreciate all the hard work that you and your team have been doing. It's a great product. So let's dive in a little bit about this concept of blind spots, things that, areas where you might have stubbed your toe or where lessons painfully and hard won. When you think about this concept of a blind spot, talk about, what comes to mind for you.
Yeah, so overall, I feel like, especially early in my career as a growth professional, my focus was on taking the existing product and just getting the numbers higher and making relatively minor changes to get there. So for me at least, one of my biggest blind spots was in realizing what more fundamental changes I can make to the product that would satisfy the goal of making it a lot bigger, maybe without absolutely transformative changes to the product, but bigger than I was currently making. And so, one of the biggest ones that comes to mind is when I was at Dropbox, I was one of the people really pushing the new Teams product, which is our multi-seat product, saying, hey, use Dropbox for Business. It's 3 or more seats, and it's got all these powerful team features, of course. And that was in contrast to our Pro product, which is only 1 seat. And it only dawned on me when I went to a later job at Airtable, where every product we sold was multi-seat, that we really should have made Dropbox Pro multi-seat earlier. And really that was a big blind spot specifically that I hadn't realized that the answer wasn't to move people from one product to another, but actually to make whatever product they're in able to satisfy and do the very important motion of team expansion in place.
I imagine that there's tension between Dropbox Pro and Dropbox Teams. How did you navigate that tension, and how would it have Would it have manifested itself in terms of like earlier upsell messaging or conversion messaging as somebody joins? Like, how does that idea manifest itself in the product?
Well, so at Dropbox, honestly, I think it would have been a really heavy lift to convert Dropbox Pro to a multi-seat product. But in retrospect, I think that was the right move, and I think that's something that they've been more contemplating more recently. But when I was at Airtable and our free plan and our first level paid plan Pro were both multi-seat, it really came home to me that it's so valuable to be able to use the product for free with multiple people, see the team value in it, and then at any level upgrade and start adding team members. Because if you have one seat and you're making, say, $100 a year, it's so much easier to get someone to just add one more seat and now make $200 a year than it might be to get them to upgrade to another product that's more expensive per seat and then also has a seat minimum of a few seats, which is the overall like jump in cost is tremendous. Like Dropbox Pro was $100 and Dropbox Team started at $750 per year.
So, what do you think you learned from this experience, particularly when it comes to sort of first principles about product design?
And so my first principles were really realizing that, if you're a growth professional or a sales professional trying to really like move the numbers, sell the product you got, there are times when you need to kind of stand back and think to yourself, what's really holding us back at a fundamental level as to what we're selling? And should I make kind of a strategic case to change that to, the people who are running that kind of core product or that deeper aspect of the product? And, honestly, for me, one of the signs of a really great growth person or a really great salesperson is in the work that they're locally doing, they see these larger strategic opportunities and they make a clear, number-supported, anecdote-supported case for making the bigger changes to the company and the product that really will unlock even larger gains in their particular function.
I feel like a lot of people aspire to be like that, but I think some part of it is cultural. It comes down to like the right kind of people working at the company and then the permission structure that enables them to make that kind of proactive recommendation and both feel like it will be well received, but also if people don't immediately adopt that proposal, it doesn't mean that they're disliked or disregarded, but it's sort of the feedback mechanism and the feedback loop is a function of the culture. How do you think about building organizations that can manifest that kind of feedback and manifest that kind of performance, that kind of proactivity? Because I don't think it comes naturally, particularly in a remote first world where people aren't always sure what is allowed in terms of recommendations.
Totally. I think it can really go both ways. From the leadership side, I do think an openness to feedback, transparency, and not kind of shooting the messenger when you do get a message that conflicts with the current plan or the current approach can really unlock that. For instance, instead of just saying, no, we don't do that, you could say, our hesitancy for doing that is this particular reason, but I could see us doing that in this case. So for instance, people might say, why don't we do a Super Bowl ad? And that might just be a crazy idea, be like, oh, that's too expensive, whatever. But you could say, look, we don't have a product that has broad enough appeal, and we currently don't have a paid marketing budget that supports a $5 to $7 million ad, and so that's the reason we're not doing it. But if either of those things changed, then we could do a Super Bowl ad, right? And so even just showing people that, like, look, there are different thresholds with the business, and we're not just going to shut you down. We're going to have a conversation about it, even if it's one paragraph, I think does increase people's enthusiasm for sharing these ideas. Another thing from the top down is really saying, hey, your mandate is to do X for any given role, but anything we can do as a company that supports you succeeding in this role, we're open to discussing. That kind of is a general kind of opener. The other thing is being really clear about the strategic goals of the company. Like, are we trying to make more money? Are we trying to land more unique customers to cover the market? Are we trying to be as efficient as possible, kind of make the most like ARR per dollar spent? Those are all very different goals, even though they're all trying to grow the revenue base of the company. But being very clear about your strategy and your goals unlocks an ability, for some people at least, to be creative in how you might achieve those strategies and goals. And now I'm going to switch to the other side, actually, because I think it is also incumbent on people in whatever org they are to then bring up these potential blind spots. Because the reality is, the leadership is not on the ground. The leadership is not in every sales call. They're not seeing the successes and failures, in the dirt, so to speak. And so, there is a lot of value to someone seeing those anecdotes, laddering them up, and having these overall realizations and bringing them to leadership. And you correctly highlighted the hesitancy a lot of people have, especially where they feel like they don't have a mandate to do it, or they're remote. They feel like maybe they don't have the depth of relationship to bring up something like this. And so, one of the main things actually I mentor my team on as they grow is saying that, hey, when you have these gut feels, like in the Matrix when you saw a black cat, twice, and it's like, that's weird. When you see these things and you think, oh, it's just my craziness, think to yourself, is it your craziness or is it something that is actually valid? And so first, investigate it yourself. Like, see if you can make a case that you would believe if you were kind of your own objective third party. Make a case to yourself. And about 50 to 70% of ideas die there. You're like, oh, I couldn't make a case to myself, actually. But then if you could make a case to yourself, you're like, yeah, this makes sense. Now, try to put it together so your data points are things that other people can understand. Like, actually take your gut feel as to what's happening and try to find those examples. To be honest, Otter's good at this because you can actually query Otter and say, hey, what are all the cases we lost a deal because of X? And it'll give them all to you across all your conversations. And then you could be like, huh, so now I've got like 7 out of 20 closed lost deals for this reason. This is something I could take to leadership and make a case. So get your evidence together. And then also think to yourself, is this aligned with the strategic goals of the company? Like, what did the CEO say that we're trying to do here? And, again, I went over that a little bit earlier, but if the CEO says we're trying to do X and you found a pretty big like revenue blind spot related to satisfying the goal of X, it's kind of believable and really incumbent on you to flag that. And also to realize that, hey, I'm going to bring this up, kind of go out on a limb, but this might not work all the time. Like, to also just admit, this is kind of like, kind of going up to a new person you haven't met before and saying, hey, do you want to be friends? Maybe most of the time they won't want to be friends, but like some of the time they will, and it's worth the try. And so kind of putting that together in your head, making a case for it, kind of like letting go of outcome, and then saying, hey, this is what I see, this is the opportunity, and honestly writing it down. Like, one of the things I do see sometimes, even in senior people, is that they'll just bring it up as kind of an idea to keep it very lightweight, but then it doesn't stick because people are like, what is this? Where's the evidence? Have you thought this through? So I think just writing a simple half-page doc with some links to evidence and some clear thinking, kind of Amazon style, maybe in a way, lightweight, that opinion stick as a strategic viewpoint.
I love that. I mean, that's such a great framework for people that are listening to absorb. I've got a question. So, well, first on the specifics of growth, the mechanics of growth, just picking your brain for a second. When you think about this kind of upsell motion of bringing people in on a lower tier and then moving them higher, do you have a point of view or in your experience at Dropbox and Airtable and now Otter on the moments to do that? Obviously, there are opportunities in the course of their ongoing usage, but I think there's actually sometimes a reticence or a debate about how early you want to present a new offer, meaning like the moment that they join, for example, or after some moment of delight. Do you have a point of view, like a framework or a playbook that you use to figure out when do I insert the opportunity to say, hey, bring on your team, or use this feature, et cetera? Obviously, some features are gated, but there's probably a philosophy in place, I would imagine, that governs when you want to present that message. And I'm just curious what your perspective is.
Yeah, that's fair. So one thing is in the first connection with someone, initial onboarding, or maybe the first call if you're a salesperson, I try to find ways that we could mutually kind of commit to each other a little bit more for the future and really make a communication channel. So what's the first thing that any application asks for you when you first get there?
Well, if you're logging in, it's like create your profile, your username and password, et cetera.
That's right. Or even a blog, it's like, hey, put in your email to get my newsletter, right?
Right, exactly.
And so what that is, it's not just an arbitrary part of the internet. It's actually making that connection between you and the site. Now the site has a way of contacting you again. And so, that could just be an email, but for some places like at Dropbox, it was a download. We try to install the Dropbox client on your computer. And then for some places it might be, getting your phone number or getting your calendar info or, getting, maybe your schedule that we can meet again, something like that to set up that ongoing connection. The other thing people ask for is like, fill out this information so we get a demo, right? Like, give us some other info. So I'd say first you want to make that connection. Then as far as when you give them different features for like, one of the classic ones is invite your coworkers to the site, right? And my friend Elena Verna is a great growth leader. And, she and I agree that like actually putting that in the onboarding flow can be very powerful. But a lot of people I've worked with have said, that's too early. Like, why would I invite someone to a site
That's the
that I haven't
essence
even
of my
used
question.
before?
That's the
Yeah,
essence of my
exactly.
question. Yeah.
That's the one that always comes up is like, why are we inviting people to something we haven't even tried? And I think there's a few good reasons there. One, a lot of people aren't going to do it. I'd say 80% of people are not going to do it. But those people who don't do it will get the idea that they could do it. So they will get the idea that this is a team site and, already like I can invite my team members and I don't, but maybe I do want to do it next time. And so that's a good communication device even if they don't use it. The other thing is that I think some of us who build these things are very kind of, I don't know, type A worried people. And I think a lot of people using these things are maybe of a different mindset. So surprisingly often someone will come to the site and actually go through and be like, yeah, I haven't used this yet, but if I did get into it, I would use it with Sam and Sarah. And so why don't I just add them and we can see if we all like it. They kind of do it together. And so there will be people who do that. The other thing about it is that, we always think about optimizing for the kind of totally fresh user. Like, oh, someone's going to come in not knowing anything. But that's actually not true. Like if you think about it, when you sign up for SaaS software, maybe 10 or 20% of the time, you actually know exactly what you're doing. It's either the second time you signed up for it at a new company, or you signed up for a competitor in the past, and you've heard really good things about this other piece of software, and you're like, let's do this one. And so, you might be actually a lot higher commitment than we conceive of as the kind of the base case. So if you think about that case, what if you were switching, say, from like, Evernote to Notion? You'd be like, dude, we should just all get on this. You might type in everyone because you're so high commitment. So I think there are these cases where you want to let high commitment people do their thing, but you also don't want to scare off low commitment people, which is the default, from doing their thing. So I think offering something a little bit earlier is good. In general, I try to give people a chance to do something very early for the high commitment people. Like even if it's your first time coming to the site, maybe give them an upgrade button in case they're ready to upgrade. But don't push them hard, don't paywall them, until they see the value. So ideally, one thing I've reflected on is a lot of these websites, the pricing model is really an onboarding timeline. It's really, they monetize you in the amount of time the average person takes to fully build a habit. And so if you look at meditation apps, they often try to monetize you immediately because just the fact that you've installed a meditation app means that you're pretty high intent and you might be ready to start a habit. If you look at Asana, they give you 1,000 free to-dos. And after you've done 1,000 to-dos, whether in a week or a month or a year, you probably reached the habit point. If you look at Palantir, they want to talk to you because they know that you're not going to make a habit loop until you've talked to probably, 20 hours at least of person-to-person interaction, understanding the nuance of what this service could mean for your business. And same with ServiceNow and a lot of these demo products. So in many ways, I feel like monetization steps are really a question of time to understand value.
I love this framework and I love thinking about it, and I think it's exactly right. I have a question. Tell me about your title, Chief Growth Officer. I think there's a lot of people in the world that aren't sure. How does growth interplay with product? What are there might be probably a group, a community, I would imagine, of people that all have an agreed upon set of principles and frameworks around what it means to be the head of growth. But then there's a lot of people that don't know, a lot of people in your peers in sales and marketing. How do you view your role and how does it sit next to the CMO, the Chief Product Officer, the CRO, and what is your mandate? Do you have a clear set of directs, or is it that your job is essentially influencing like the head of product? I'm just curious.
Yeah, in general, growth teams are using they're using the tools of product engineering, design, data to fulfill the goals usually of marketing. And so, marketing's job is to get new users on the site and often to drive actual monetization. But they're doing it almost all outside the site. Like, let's get people to the site and kind of signed up or into the funnel somehow. Whereas growth's job is usually to maybe overlap a little bit with marketing, especially on the logged out pages, but then really finish the loop in site. So when they come into the site, let's get them activated, let's get them engaged, let's get them monetized. And so it's really kind of optimizing those services to get the most people through that funnel and to the eventual happy paying customer point. And so I really think of it as kind of like the in-product, kind of numeric success team. And so in some ways, very much overlapping with marketing and goals and overlapping with product and tools. That can be a bit of a conflict, frankly, with the marketing and the inbound team. There are companies that I advise occasionally where I say, just let your product team do growth. In many ways, growth is as much a skill as it is a separate discipline. And so if you're good at looking at data, if you're good at running experiments, if you're good at taking something that's already good and making it great from like a conversion and otherwise perspective, then you can just do growth. You don't necessarily have to have kind of a separate department. One of the ways we set it up at a few companies I've worked at is that the growth team actually owns entire flows. And so especially the monetization flow, usually the onboarding flow, sometimes the logged out pages and the core product surface areas like home. And that latter camp is what I own at Otter. And so I own like sign up, virality, sharing, like the entire core website experience, and then also the mobile app. And so that I actually kind of own core product as well. And that's great because we can both build a great product, keep it healthy, add new features, and do growth work on top of it, all within one team. And so we don't have this kind of like us versus them nature. There are challenges to that as well, though. It means that I need to hire a team of people who do all those different things well, and then split time amongst those different endeavors. So sometimes people are like, why is the growth team migrating the code to a new, Next.js or React or what have you? And so it's like, well, we own the service area, so we have to do the migrations as well as the new growth work, and that's better than having two teams who are kind of at odds as to who's doing what.
So, Darius, you are the person that sets the default setting in Otter so that other people in the meeting get the transcript if they were on the calendar invite. Is that correct?
Well, it's not a default setting. It's a page where you go to during onboarding where we say, hey, do you want us to connect to all your meetings or...
Yeah, I selected it, and there was one meeting where I did not want all of the... and they got like this email alert, but I appreciate the virality of it because it certainly brings them into the ecosystem.
It is something we're trying to get more nuance with. Like, we do encourage people to have Otter join their meetings because then you get a lot of value out of it, and the people even on your meeting get the value out of the notes. But we are trying to give people more and more tools to turn it on and off for certain meetings, automatically turn it off in certain cases, and really give people more and more granular controls around that.
Well, I think that the pace of product development across the organization is really impressive as a very happy user. So kudos. The last question I have is sort of around, the new blind spots that are emerging. And I think one of the things that you have a point of view on is that we're still in some ways underestimating, if that can be said, the impact of AI. What do you think we're missing or so I guess, old school or legacy executives are missing when it comes to AI? And how do you think organizations of the future should think about incorporating AI for, to achieve, better outcomes, whatever form those might be in terms of better efficiency or higher growth or whatever, however you want to frame it?
To tie it back to the previous question, I think a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'll just AI a few things. Like I'll just add it to a few meetings or I'll just use it for this one case where I need to make a doc. And it's funny, it reminds me a little bit of the days when I was at Dropbox. And Dropbox's core innovation was a separate folder. We didn't back up your whole computer. You would drag things into a folder if you wanted them in the cloud. And that made it simpler and, everything. And then eventually, if you use Dropbox, you eventually have this realization that it's so weird to actually not have things in Dropbox. Like, why would I have an important file just on my computer, which if the hard drive crashed will be lost forever? I should have everything in Dropbox. And people would kind of go from some things to everything. But that realization took years for most people. And, I think we're at a similar place with AI. Like people are like, oh, I'll use AI for this one thing. And, if you look at, people who are kind of growing up with AI, using it in college or their first job, one thing some people say is that young people see AI as an operating system. Like you do everything through it. And I think that's really becoming the default. So, to take the Otter example, I've seen people like, oh, I'll just record this one meeting because I need to share it. They go to a place where, why would I record everything? Like, it's crazy that I said something valuable and then it was lost forever. So let's record everything. Let's put it all in the AI. And then let's start with AI. So, even for this interview, some of these questions you sent me, some of them I just paste into Otter, and I have Otter generate a response for me from my years of meetings. And it's a pretty good response. And then I paste it back and I'm like, okay. And one of the things you said kicking off this call is you're like, hey, you did a lot of great prep for this. I'm like,
I did.
I was like, I actually have some help. I use AI to take my previous thoughts, put them together, answer new questions, transcribe what I say quickly so that I don't have to type. And it's just a huge unlock. It's just, I'm doing the same things, but the amount of like brain cell work that I have to put into it is just dramatically lower. And so I can do more things. And so I think that's the unlock for people, is just really embracing this stuff and making it not an occasional use, but really a default.
One last operational question, then I want to get some recommendations. But I say this with a tremendous amount of respect and praise. But if you had told me that there's Otter and then there's 15 other meeting recording or meeting transcription tools, in addition to the stalwarts, the old legacy companies like Gong, and that many of them would achieve, I don't know about breakout velocity, but many of them over 100 million in ARR, many of them growing quickly, I would have been skeptical that there's so much room for effectively the same type of technology. At the same time, you can also see that when you're hyper focused on a specific, use case and a specific kind of a workspace and product space and problem space, that you can actually continue to innovate in such a way that you establish a bigger, total addressable market, a bigger opportunity. How do you think about that? The fact that Otter has, I don't know, 50. I mean, it feels almost trivial in some ways to build the commodity features of the product, and yet Otter is growing rapidly and still developing new use cases and new modes of interaction at a dizzying pace. Like, how do you square that circle? I'm always curious because it's so impressive, and I've worked in other categories where it felt like we had reached some kind of saturation point, and then you look back 10 years later and the market's 10 times bigger than whatever you thought you had achieved 10 years earlier. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what it is, Otter's actually been doing this a very long time. We built all this technology in-house. We've been doing it for 7-8 years. And so we have, like, from the ground up, we built it in-house, allowing us to give a more generous free plan, actually the cheapest pro plan on the market, because of this technology that we built. That being said, it is true that kind of the commoditized tools have made it able to kind of easy to assemble, like a really basic version of this. Easier, but I think you'll see in the next few years how the best tools are actually cutting even more new ground and like actually able to help you even more. And I think that's the reason to use Otter today and in the future. Like, one of the things we do that the other tools don't do as well is we allow you to search across all your meetings with AI chat. So for instance, like if you had all your all these interviews in here, you could actually go to them. And so maybe a company comes to you like, hey, Sam, like I need advice on this topic. And here are my 10 questions. You could literally paste every question into Otter Chat and it'll go through all of the different advice and podcasts you've done and actually answer that question really well. And you can send it back to the startup. And so now in 15 minutes, you've actually answered like an hour's worth of really deep questions just based on your own knowledge base. And so that's a power that Otter unlocks that I don't think some of the other basic like record and share startups unlock. And I think in many ways, it's going to be what we are is on the edge of a technological revolution. I think of AI in many ways as kind of like another industrial revolution. So about 150 years ago, we learned that we could take steam energy and metal parts and do a lot of the work that humans did before. And we spent about 50 years just figuring out how to do all that work. Like, hey, can you turn this into a washing machine? Can you turn this into a motorized loom? Can you turn this into a some other kind of device that takes care of something that otherwise a human would do? And I think we're at maybe not 50 years, but another big batch of time where we're going to be taking these new tools and turning them into really valuable labor-saving devices. And I think just like, the car industry, there were like 100 car industries back in like 1910, because like you could just take some metal, put some oil in it, and have a car. But then, as things developed, you found that certain companies optimized it more. They innovated on process or business model or customization, and then you did have the industry kind of coalesce around a smaller number. And then only with the recent electrical car revolution do you see a new batch of those coming out. So I think these kind of technological revolutions inspire these markets that grow quickly and then a little bit kind of normalize.
I love that answer. Darius, we're at the end of our time together, but before we go, we like to pay it forward a little bit and share content, people, could be mentors, could be great bosses, could be podcasts or books you've read, but just, some ideas that have inspired you that you want to share with the audience. When I frame it like that, it could be a book, it could be a podcast, it could be a great boss, it could be a great investor. What comes to mind? What do you want us to know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots, I guess. First off, like our CEO at Otter, Sam Liang, is amazing. I think he's one of the people really leading the revolution in AI today. And he only gets himself out a little bit, but definitely listen to his stuff. As far as like people in the growth space, I really love like Lenny's podcast. Obviously, most people know at this point. Also, Elena Verna, who I brought up earlier, has some really great stuff. Brian Balfour has some really fresh takes in his Unsolicited Feedback podcast. Those are some of my favorites to get out there. And then books-wise, I really like What Got You Here Won't Get You There from a management perspective. I think there's lots of good nuggets in there, as well as Crucial Conversations. That's a good one for really moving your company forward, as we were talking about earlier, to the getting through those really tough discussions at businesses.
That's great. Darius, if folks want to reach out to you, are you open to it? How should they get in touch if you're open to it?
Yeah, for sure. I'm on Twitter at DariusMC, DariusMC on Twitter. Also LinkedIn, same. And always down to chat with other people in the space.
Awesome. Darius, thanks so much for being on Revenue Blind Spots. Thanks for your great work at Otter. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for the great chat, Sam.